Is it true that Rashi states that one should not study Tanach, the Bible, too much?
In the Talmud Bavli, Masechet Berachot, Kaf Het Amud Beth 28b, line 22, we find as follows. Tano Rabbanan, it was taught by our teachers, by our rabbis. Keshehala Rabbi Eliezer, when Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol, the famous Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanos, when he became ill and infirm and was close to death. Nichnesu Talmido Levakero, his students came to visit him, essentially to take their leave of him. Omerulom, they said to him, Rabbenu, our teacher, our master, Lamadenu Orhod Hayim, teach us the ways of life, literally. In other words, give us your last and best words of advice, how to live our lives in this world. So that we may inherit the world to come. Omar lahem, he said to them as follows, Hizaharu bichvod havrechem, be very careful and take great note with regards to the honor and respect shown to your colleagues, to your friends. So this is a piece of, one could say, social advice. This is the statement that we wish to discuss today. Literally, these words mean prevent your sons from something he refers to as higayon, which we'll have to explain. Because the word higayon can mean expressing a sound, making a sound, such as stating a word or a syllable. That's called a herer, the same word as higayon. It also refers to thought. Higayon also refers to thinking. So that was the second piece of advice. The third was V'hoshivum ben birkei talmidei hachomim. Place your sons literally between the knees of talmidei hachomim, of great Torah scholars, so that your sons will imbibe the true, authentic spirit of the Torah, so they will grow up to be people of whom you will be proud. And the fourth piece of advice was, Uchashatem mitpalalim, and when you pray before Hashem, which refers to the Shemona Esrei, the standing silent prayer, No'u lifnei mi atem omadim. Know, be aware, be very aware before whom you stand. In other words, do not treat tefillah, prayer, lightly. It is not something that you just stand up and do in a perfunctory fashion. And if you follow these words of advice, you will inherit the world to come. That is the statement that we find in the Talmud. Here we shall mention, first of all, the Perush, the commentary of Rashi, who writes, with regards to the words, Man'u b'nechem mina higayon, prevent your sons from the study of higayon. Rashi says, Lo thargilum b'mikra yoter midai. Do not allow them to get used to habituate themselves to studying Mikra. Mikra refers to the entire Tanach, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, the 24 books of the Hebrew Bible. Do not allow them to study the Mikra yoter midai, literally too much. Why not? Mishum de mashcha. That is what Rashi writes. Mishum de mashcha. The words Mishum de mashcha mean because it is likely to attract or draw a person to study more and more. That is apparently how we must understand these words. Mishum de mashcha. Lashon acher, a second option, a second possible perush, says Rashi, Misihat Yoladim, which is somewhat less clear, although in fact both of these perushim are problematic at first glance. Sihat Yoladim literally means don't allow your your sons to get involved in empty, idle talk and chatter, as is the want of young people, children, youngsters to do. That is apparently how we should understand the second statement of Rashi. This statement of Rashi has been the subject of many discussions. The most obvious difficulty with this statement, this perush of Rashi, is the fact that in the Talmud Bavli, in Masechet Kiddushin, Daf Lamed 30a on line 39, also in Avodah Zarah Yod Tet Amud Bet 19b, line 2, it states as follows: Le'olam yeshalesh adam shenotho. A person should study Torah by a system of thirds, dividing one's time or one's study into three parts. Shalish Mikra, 1/3 studying Mikra, Tanach, Bible. Shalish Mishnah, which is the brief and easily memorized statement of the halachot, of the bottom line of the halachic discussions of the Chachamim. That is referred to as Mishnah. And Shalish Talmud. The word Talmud really means delving into those things, both the Mikra, the Tanach, and the Mishnah, delving into these things more deeply to truly understand the nature of what is being said, not just to read the words and perhaps take in a small part of what is being said, but to really get to the bottom of things. That is what the word Talmud really means. The word Talmud is learning in depth, by investigation, by asking questions and finding the answer to that question. And the Talmud that we have today is a record of all those discussions that took place in the past. Now this statement is halakha. This is halakha pesuka. This is a universally accepted statement of halakha. It appears in the Rambam, in Ilchot Talmud Torah, Perek Aleph. It appears in the Tur, it appears in the Rosh, it appears in the Rif, it appears in the Shulchan Aruch, in Yeredia Siman Resh Mem Waw. In other words, this is how one is supposed to study Torah. Rambam writes in Ilchot Talmud Torah, Perek Aleph, Halakha Yod Aleph, in the text before me, V'hayav l'shalesh zaman lamidatho. And a person must divide his study of Torah, which he explains previously as being a chovah, an obligation on every Jew to study Torah daily. One must divide one's study of the Torah into three sections. Shalish b'Torah shebichtav, 1/3 studying the Mikra, the Tanach, the Bible. Shalish b'Torah sheba'al peh, the oral tradition, that is the Mishnah, as we explained. And Shalish yavinu yaskil aharith davar mireshito. The third is what we refer to as Talmud, and Rambam here explains what Talmud is. He says this refers to delving into and understanding deeply and understanding how one thing flows from another, and when a new point of discussion arises, knowing how to compare it to a previously learnt halakha or principle, etc. All this is called Talmud, says Rambam. And Rambam continues and explains. For example, he says, Haya ba'al umanuth. If a person is a artisan of some type, shall we say he is a blacksmith, it could be anything. Yeheh osek b'melacha shalosh sha'ot bayom. He should study. He should work. He should be engaged in his economic activities, his livelihood, 3 hours of the day. Uva Torah tesha, and studying the Torah 9 hours a day. At this point, I'm sure many people would raise their eyebrows and wonder what exactly is going on here. In what kind of world was Rambam living? But apparently, once upon a time, it was possible for a serious person who took his work seriously and applied himself diligently to work only a few hours a day to support himself and his family, and he could devote many hours of the day to the study of Torah and other spiritual pursuits. I think we all know that today this is not the case, or very rarely is that the case. And that itself is worthy of discussion, but not today. Rambam says those 9 hours per day of Torah study, Koreh b'shalosh mehen b'Torah shebichtav, he should read literally the Torah shebichtav, the Bible, for 3 hours. Uveshalosh sha'ot b'Torah shebe'al peh, and 3 hours study the Mishnah and the other halachic sources, where without all the explanations and the in-depth understanding. Uveshalosh mithbonen b'da'athor l'havin davar midavar, and 1/3, 3 hours, he should devote to looking into these things and understanding them more correctly, more deeply, more profoundly. It is true that there is another perush, another explanation, that of the Ran and others, that these 3 parts, Shalish b'Mikra, Shalish b'Mishnah, Shalish b'Talmud, do not have to be equal thirds. The idea is that one devotes a serious amount of time every day to the study of Mikra, the Tanach, a serious amount of time to the study of Mishnah, the Torah shebe'al peh, which, by the way, is the same as studying the Rambam. Studying Rambam's Mishneh Torah is like studying the Mishnah, the Torah shebe'al peh, in the sense that it gives you just the conclusion, the bottom line, without all the explanation, without all the discussion. So you gain on the one hand and you lose on the other hand. And another portion of the day is to be invested in understanding what you have learned in those other parts of the Torah more deeply. So it doesn't necessarily have to be 3 equal thirds. So says the Ran and others. Be that as it may, we see that this halakha, which, as we said, is universally accepted, states explicitly that a person is to study Tanach every day, and not just for 5 minutes, but for a serious length of time. So how can Rashi here say in Barachot Daf Kaf, how can he say that you should prevent your sons from studying Tanakh too much? Yoter midai, he writes. The obvious question is, what is too much? Who decides what is too much? What is the yardstick? What is the measurement of such a thing? And what does he mean by mishum de mashcha? Because it encourages a person, or entices and induces a person to study more and more of the Mikra, of the Tanakh. And as we mentioned, this has troubled many of the commentators over the centuries. The fact of the matter is that in a manuscript of Rashi's Perush commentary on the Talmud, we find there one extra word. It doesn't say mishum de mashcha, which simply means because it leads you on, it encourages you to do more of the same. Rather, it says mishum de mashcha leminuth. This appears in a manuscript. Literally, because it can lead a person to minuth. Minuth refers to apostasy or questioning, doubting various basic principles and aspects of the Torah for various philosophical, theological reasons, or simply because perhaps a person would rather not be bothered, would rather not feel themselves obligated to follow the Torah. Now this word, leminuth, was obviously expunged by the Christian censors. We know that this word, the word minim, minuth, was systematically removed from all the texts already 500 odd years ago, and either simply removed, expunged, or replaced by other words such as epikoros or similar words which confuse the issue and are not the original language and have different meanings. This was because the Christian censors knew that the word minuth frequently referred to the early Christians, and they were correct. That is the truth. In this case, in this particular case, this is not what the word means, but frequently this is what the word referred to, and therefore they did not allow any mention of Christians in general. The word Nosrim, was also systematically removed, referring to Christians. Any explicit reference to Yeshua HaNosri, Shem Risha'im Yirkav, Jesus, was removed from our sources, and only in the last generation or two have many of our basic texts, such as the Talmud, the Mishneh Torah of the Rambam, the Torah, Shulchan Aruch, and other books, have they been reprinted in either slightly more correct or entirely more correct editions, with these acts of censorship having been reversed. With this newfound knowledge regarding the word leminuth at the end of this sentence of Rashi, Mishum de mashcha leminuth, we understand Rashi's intention. Rashi means to say that there are certain things in the Tanach, in the Bible, where certain questions, issues are raised, such as the question of why there is evil in the world, why we frequently see the evil prospering and the righteous suffering, and many other questions. We even know that the entire book, the Megillah of Koheleth, Ecclesiastes, it was considered by some of the Chachamim correct to remove it from the canon altogether, because of the various difficult, profound questions that it raises. Furthermore, upon investigation, we find that this Perush of Rashi is not originally Rashi's Perush, not his understanding. He received it by various channels from much earlier sources. We find in the somewhat known, but not sufficiently known, I think, book called Sefer Yuhasin HaShalem, written by Rabbi Avraham Zakuth from Portugal about 500 years ago. He was a great Torah scholar, a very great Chacham, and he was also, by no accident, not by coincidence, he was also perhaps the greatest astronomer of his generation. He was consulted by the King of Portugal, and the Portuguese to this day are very proud of his achievements in that field. Rabbi Avraham Zakuth produced an improved version, a very much improved version of the astrolabe, a device for making astronomical observations and calculations. Till his time they had been made of wood. He produced one of metal, and he added certain features to it. He also, due to his great expertise and knowledge in astronomy, he drew up astronomical tables known as an almanac, which allowed the Portuguese captains, sailors of that time, to sail all over the world and discover new lands and trade routes, as is well known. Vasco da Gama, for example, was one such person who used his inventions and his tables. He also wrote this book called Sefer Yuhasin, which is a kind of Talmudic encyclopedia which contains much crucial information. In this book we find, in the London Edinburgh edition, on page 124, he says as follows: "Ve'echtov b'chan ma shepiresh Rav Tzemach Gaon," and I shall write here that which was written and explained by Rav Tzemach Gaon. Rav Tzemach Gaon was the head of the yeshiva in Pumbeditha in Bavel, in Babylon, at the end of the 9th century, Leminyanam, in the years 872 to 819, Daled Alafim Tau Resh Lamed Beth to Tau Resh Nun, a short time before Rav Sa'adia Gaon. And he wrote the following explanation, interpretation of these words: Man'u b'nechem min ha'higayon, milahagoth b'mikraoth shehem notim leminuth. This is not Rashi, this is Rav Tzemach Gaon, approximately 2.5 centuries before Rashi. In other words, Rav Tzemach Gaon says the word higayon means a study of Mikra, of Tanach, on certain matters, certain areas, certain types of discussions in the Tanach, which are profound, which are deep, which require maturity and prior knowledge. It is not for everyone at the beginning of their studies. It is not for children. It's not for very young people. And therefore he said, "Mana'u banechem min higayon." Prevent your sons from such studies. He did not say, "Man'u athmechem min higayon." Prevent yourselves. Do not allow yourselves to study these things. He said specifically, "Man'u banechem min higayon." Your sons, your children. Then he goes on to say, and he brings an example of a pasuk in Yirmiyahu, in Jeremiah chapter 12, Perek Yod Bet, where Yirmiyahu asks the famous question, "Madu'a derech rashaim thaleha?" Why is the path of the evildoers successful? Shalu kol b'chadei vaghed. All the conniving and bad-intentioned people lead undisturbed and comfortable lives. Why is this so? So with regards to such a pasuk, says Rav Tzemach Gaon, this pasuk they can study. Yuchlu lehagot sheyesh sham teshuvah, because if you go on 2 pasukim later in that same chapter, in Yirmiyahu, you find the answer. Ki eth raglaim rasta, etc. The pasuk there explains that you had to experience these types of people and the ways in which they would persecute you in your own town of Anathoth, which was near Yerushalayim, because much worse than that awaits you. So this was really a baptism of fire, so to speak, and you must understand that this was necessary. So that is the Perush of Rav Tzemach Gaon. It is clear that Rashi's Perush, the first of his 2 Perushim, is based on that statement. In this book, Sefer Yohasin, he goes on to say, Rashi beferek Tefilat HaShachar, and our statement in Masechet Berachot Daf Kavhet, Kathav lahagoth harbe pasuk, to study much Mikra. Inameh misihat hayiladim. These are the 2 statements mentioned by Rashi. That's the first Perush of this statement, according to Rabbi Avraham Zakuth in his book Sefer Yohasin. The second Perush is as follows. He says, V'yesh mefarashim, there are those who explain, Higayon kifshuto, who explain the term Higayon in a more straightforward and simple manner. The word Higayon refers to Chochmatha Higayon, by which he means to say Greek philosophy. Logika, or logikos in Greek. And therefore he said, prevent your sons but not yourselves, because for certain people, when they are older, when they are wiser, they are able, and even some of them should study some of these things, perhaps, because it will be to their benefit to know what other people claim and think, and their claims perhaps against the Torah, or why they view things differently, and a person will gain greater understanding and be more thoroughly impressed by what the Torah has to say. This Perush appears in a second source as well, in the Aruch, Rabbi Nathan Miromi of Rome. Rabbi Nathan Bar-Yehiel, who lived in Rome 1 generation before Rashi. Rashi, in fact, wrote to him. They corresponded. Wrote in his Talmudic dictionary called the Aruch, under the entry Har Hey Gimel. He brings the Perush, both referring to the Gemara in Berachot and the Gemara in Sanhedrin, interestingly enough, with regards to Sanheriv, or around that place where Sanheriv is discussed, as we will explain in a moment. Man'u banechem min higayon, Perush mefaterim pasuk kasurato. In other words, we're talking here about people who take pasukim literally and do not understand, or not yet ready to understand, that you cannot take all pasukim and all statements in the Tanach literally. That there are things which are a mashal, which are a metaphor, there are things which are a type of hint, or should be understood in a a different way than that which strikes one at first reading. This is what the Aruch states, and this Perush is also clearly based on this interpretation of Rav Tzemach Gaon, because he's talking about taking Pesukim and understanding them incorrectly. Here he speaks about understanding things literally. It is also worthwhile noting that from both of these sources it is apparent that they had a statement to that effect, Man'u b'nechem min higayon, not only in Masechet Berachot on page 28b, as we mentioned, but also in Sanhedrin on Daf Sadi Waw Aleph 96a, which in our text before us does not appear. But they are clearly quoting this from both these sources, because the discussion of that pasuk in Yirmiyahu, in Jeremiah, appears only in Sanhedrin. The problem is that part of that statement was lost in the shuffle in Masechet Sanhedrin. It does not appear in almost any of the sources before us. It survived in only one extant Yemenite manuscript, which is today in Yad HaRav Herzog in Jerusalem, where the correct reading of the Talmud in Sanhedrin, Daf Tzadi Waw, appears. So let us sum up what we have seen. The Perush of Rashi sounds unusual and does not seem to fit other statements of Hazal about the study of the Tanach being something which has to be regular, daily, and quite some time has to be spent on it. And for Rashi to say, do not allow your sons to study too much Tanach, that is a very both vague and also basically incomprehensible statement. But if we add the words mishum de mashcha leminuth, because it leads to misunderstanding and therefore to questioning the Torah or questioning the ways of Hashem in the world before a person is ready for these kinds of discussions, then it makes a great deal more sense. And this is essentially the Perush that we find in Rav Tzemach Gaon, quoted in Sefer Yohasin and in the Aruch. And this is also the Perush that we find in two other Rishonim, both in the Meiri, both in Berachot and Sanhedrin, and in the Riyaz in Sanhedrin. They quote this statement, Man'u b'nechem min higayon, and they explain why it is proper and correct to study that pasuk, for example, in Yirmiyahu, where that question is asked, why are the evil successful, why did they flourish? Because the answer is to be found immediately in that very same place. So this Perush was known by other Rishonim as well. From all of the foregoing, we understand that to conclude from Rashi's Perush, which was censored, from which a word was removed, which essentially renders it incomprehensible, to conclude based on Rashi's Perush that we are being told here not to study too much Tanach, or at least our children should not study too much Tanach, this is entirely untrue. This is not what the statement was intended to convey. It spoke specifically about certain kinds of discussions in the Tanach, which are not anywhere near a majority of the discussions in the Tanach. They are, in fact, quite few and far between. And those things should be glossed over, skipped over, when the young people are children, when they are young adults even, teenagers, until they mature, until they have more experience, they have studied more Torah, they have studied more Mishnah and Talmud, and are better able to deal with and digest such discussions and understand how these things should be understood. The second interpretation that Rabbi Avraham Zakuth in Sefer Yohasin mentioned is that of Rav Hai Gaon, the last of the Gaonim of Bavel, 2 or so generations before Rashi, because there we find, this is in a book called Minhath Kenaoth, which was written by Rabbi Abba Mari, Rabbi Moshe Hayarhi, from the city of Lunel in Provence, in the south of France. In the Pressburg edition, it is to be found on page 172, and in the Musadar of Cook version, it is to be found in Perek Kof Yod Gimel. There, the following statement appears. What does this mean? Piresh Rabbeinu Hai Gaon Zichrono Livracha Kemo Chochmath Ha'almantik or Ha'almantiko Uhu Adin La'ahiroth. Rav Hai Gaon explained this refers to what we said before, the study of logic, that is to say, what the Greeks called logic, which is frequently not so logical, and in fact an exercise in sophistry, or all kinds of assumptions as we know today. This was referred to in Arabic as al-mantik or al-mantiko, and this is what Rabbeinu Hai Gaon, who knew Arabic and heard these terms from the Arabs, who were his neighbors, he says this is a reference to the study of Greek philosophy. Prevent your children from studying such things when they are young, because it will only confuse them and mix them up, and the results could be disastrous. For the right person later, when a person is older, more mature, more able to discuss and learn such things, for some people these studies are possibly of value. For many, they are dangerous. That in fact is why that Hacham, that sage from Provence, Rabbi Abba Mari, Rabbi Moshe, wrote the book Minhat Qana'oth. It is a collection of letters and statements by various Hachamim at that time. We're talking about the generation of the Rashba, who lived in Barcelona, in northeastern Spain, not far from Provence. There was much discussion at that time with regards to the study of philosophy in Provence, in Spain and Portugal, where these books were known because they were translated from the Greek into Arabic, so those who understood Arabic could read them. In northern France, Thorfath, in Ashkenaz, in Germany, these books were not known. No one could understand Arabic, and they were not something that most Jews came into contact with. And this reminds us of that which is stated in the Mishnah, in the second perek of Masechet Haqiqa, at the beginning. It says, "En dorashim ba'arayoth b'shlosha, v'lo b'ma'aseh v'reshit b'shnayim, v'lo b'merkava b'yahid, ela im ken haya hacham u'mevin mida'atho." In other words, there are various aspects of the Torah, more esoteric and profound studies of a theological and eschatological nature, that the Chachamim themselves, not referring to Greek philosophy, but referring to certain aspects of the Torah, said should not be taught to even two people. Ma'aseh v'reshit should not be taught even to two people together, but and Ma'aseh Markava should not be taught even to one explicitly. In other words, the most that can be said is certain hints and cryptic statements, which, if the person is sufficiently wise and has the correct background and understanding, he will be able to put these things together in his own mind and make sense of them. More than that, we do not do. And Rambam writes in his Perush, in his commentary on this Mishnah, why is this? V'hu shehehamon, the common people, efshar lahem la'avin otam ha'inyanim. They are not capable of understanding such things. Ve'enam nimsarim ela me'ehad le'ehad. They can only be handed down from one person to another. وَنِزْهَرِمْ بَهَمْ, and we have to be very careful with these things. Ki ma'at ma'od yavin bahem ha'amon. The common folk will understand very little, if anything, of these things. U'chashish ma'em hapethi tishtabesh emunatho. When the not particularly scholarly or person of no great understanding will hear some of these discussions and these statements, tishtabesh emunatho, his understanding, his faith, his belief in the Torah and Hashem will be upset, will be undermined. And he will think that these things are plainly the opposite of the truth, when in fact the problem is that they are true, and he does not understand at all, and he should not have been allowed to hear such things. So the idea that certain areas of the Torah even, and this is similar to what Tzemach Gaon explained regarding certain things in the Tanach, in the Bible. Even certain aspects of the Torah must be kept away. Many people, particularly young people, must be kept away from those things until they are able to understand more. These are the very ancient interpretations of this statement, Man'um b'neichem mina higayon, that originally appeared in two places in the Talmud, in Berachot and in Sanhedrin. One cannot and must not conclude from this statement that we should severely limit our study of the Tanach or that of our children. That is an incorrect conclusion based on a censored text of Rashi. The root and the source of Rashi's interpretation is that which appears in the name of Rav Tzemach Gaon in Sefer Yohasin, as it appears also in Sefer Ha'aruch. And this, of course, provides a completely different picture and understanding of what Rashi was getting at. The other interpretation with regards to the study of Greek philosophy, although different, when one thinks about it, these two interpretations are not totally divorced and not really at loggerheads at all, because in both cases we are discussing different types of study that not all people, certainly not younger people, inexperienced people, immature people, are ready for. And therefore, these two explanations can be seen as complementing each other. And it goes without saying that this is also the case today. We have to construct a proper system of education for our children, grandchildren, for future generations, in line with these statements that are in congruence with these pieces of advice from the Chachamim in order to achieve the desired result.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org. If you are inspired by Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to get involved in Torah Eretz Yisrael activities in your local area, please fill out the relevant form by going to the link which appears on the screen.